Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the first in our Enterprise Solutions from Here to There webinar series today. Today's webinar is IT Security from the Inside Out. My name is Shane O'Neill. I'm the Principal EUC Architect for Enterprise Solutions. And in our webinar today, we will be looking at the various technologies that can be used as part of your IT security defense in your environment, covering everything from network security to application delivery security, endpoint security, all the way up to the user's inbox and email security. I'm very lucky to be joined this afternoon by 4 excellent panelists who are experts in each of their own fields. From IGEL, we have Simon Townsend. Simon, would you like to introduce yourself there?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I am the field CTO at IGEL. Been with IGEL about 5 years now, but been working in end user computing and endpoint security for probably around 20 plus years. Good to meet everyone.
Thanks, Simon. Joining us from Citrix, we have Niall Connolly. Niall, introduce yourself, please.
I will. Thank you very much, Shane. Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you very much for having me on as well. Niall Connolly, so I'm one of the partner technology strategists within Citrix. So I suppose started my journey with Citrix and still at Citrix, so 6 years now. Was previously a product specialist across DaaS and analytics, and then recently moved into the partner space with the kind of shift that's been going on in Citrix. So yeah, Zero Trust and IT security has been a kind of good conversation that I'm learning every day with. So I'm looking forward to this session, and as well what IGEL Checkpoint and Cato are going to bring up as well.
Excellent, thank you, Niall. Joining us from Checkpoint, we have Jonathan Irving. Jonathan, can you introduce yourself there?
Hi everyone, sorry if my camera's going on and off. We're having a few technical issues, as we always seem to on these things. Yeah, so my name's John. I've been at Checkpoint for a little under 2 years now. I lead the email security sales team here. Prior to joining Checkpoint, I was at Mimecast for just under 6 years. So for my sins, all I've spoken about for the last 8 years or so is email security, but loving it.
It's a great topic to talk about. Thanks, John. And finally joining us today from Cato Networks is Anthony Walsh, whose camera is not working, but I believe you can still hear us, Anthony.
Yes, I can indeed, and thanks, Shane. I've similar issues to John, unfortunately, with my camera, but yeah, I can still hear everyone loud and clear. And I suppose I'm the country manager for Cato. I've been working with Cato just over 2 years now, working 25 years in the cybersecurity and network security industry, and most of that in the value-added reseller space with a company I co-founded called Integrity 360, and with Cato ever since then. And really looking forward to today.
Excellent, thank you, Anthony. So our topic today, as I said, we're talking about IT security from inside out, and the whole concept of our webinar series is from here to there. So we're looking at how IT security goes from one end to the other within your product environment. And as I said, we're touching on various aspects within that. There are so many different technologies in play, so many different factors along the way, from the network to the endpoint to delivery. So what we wanted to do today is take you on the journey from there, all the way from the network down to the endpoint, down to the inbox. And hopefully from today's webinar, you'll get some ideas that will help you as you progress in your own security journey, to how you can make the right decisions for your environment to help protect you and your end users from malicious actors, bad actors out there who are trying to compromise your environment. And everything lives and dies really on the network. If you don't have your network secure, everything else beyond that becomes very difficult to manage. And Anthony, with all the different technologies that are in play for different aspects of network security, how do people make sense of it all? How are organizations trying to simplify their approach to network security?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I remember in my years working in the reseller world, we were bombarded with different vendors that wanted to partner with us, and I can only imagine what it's like for end users with the amount of different vendors out there, all saying that they can fix all their problems, etc. But I think, you know, at a high level, one of the first things that I would recommend a company should do is really trying to look at if it's possible to take a platform approach. If you look at companies like Microsoft and even CrowdStrike and how they've sort of developed a platform, and to stand back, I guess, and carefully consider the outcomes that particular company needs in order to facilitate the needs of the business now, and I suppose also in the future. And from future needs, even being mindful of how quickly things can change. If we think back to COVID, you know, and how business models and things change so rapidly. And lastly, on the sort of high level piece, what I'd say is that, you know, the companies need to consider the to-be architecture that will support those business outcomes. And at a really high level, I think that's what they need to do. But drilling into it a little bit more, if you look at it from a network security perspective, you know, and I suppose in my 25 years in the industry, if we cast our minds back and you know, think that most organizations started out with procuring probably standard network firewalls from single vendors across the board. And in those days, there were probably fewer attack surfaces out there. And the main surface essentially was the network. And that was more than adequately covered by traditional firewall vendors.
Mhm.
However, over the last number of years or even decades, we've seen those attack surfaces have changed significantly, moving from layer 3 to 4 up the stack to layer 7 and concentrating on the application side. And then, you know, vendors have responded to those, but with further expansion of a variety of different mitigation and control tooling, things like intrusion prevention systems, sandboxing, next generation anti-malware, you know, CASB, DLP. I could go on ad infinitum. But that's effectively helped to create the complexity and I suppose sprawl that customers have today and are trying to manage today. And throw on top of that then controlling corporate access when people have started working from home and hybrid workers, which has also led to a further proliferation of tooling, you know, and legacy IPsec VPN solutions, SSL VPNs, etc. And I guess for me, when I sort of stand back and look at it, you know, there was nothing else out there for 20 years except this approach. But there hasn't been that much innovation from an architecture perspective because vendors naturally have been focusing on point solutions and you know, the customers have responded to that because that's all essentially was available. And then they've had to stick all these solutions together and make them work in their particular environment. And while at the same time, the amount of resources that clients have now to do this in terms of manpower and skill set has significantly reduced. So, you know, it's what I would see very much with the SASE type model or you know, that simplified architecture model is that it's finally a bit of innovation on that side of the house. And we've seen huge innovation in other areas of IT. But finally now we're seeing it in the architecture on the network and network security. And I suppose, you know, one of the things the CIOs used to say to me more than anything else over my whole career was that their number one priority was really the reduction of operational risk. And I think that's why the market is embracing a SASE approach now, because, you know, trying to reduce that risk with the existing tool sets, like they've actually added to the risk because it's got so complex. And, you know, I'd say over the last 2 to 3 years, we're seeing CIOs looking for simplification within their environments, both, I suppose, technically and for that matter, commercially and contractually also. And they're focused much more on the time to value now. So the ROI is not just based on the features and the payback on that. It's based a lot more on time to deploy and time to enable and consequently mitigate, you know. And that's what I see is really driving the adoption of the simplified SASE approach, and I suppose concentrating as well on not just a single vendor, but also a single platform or single technology stack. resolve those needs,
Yeah, so SASE is a growing space in the market, and I think even Gartner have even a dedicated Magic Quadrant now for SASE. So with that approach to networking security, are customers embracing having a single vendor for all the services combined?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, they are. And I remember before I took up the role with Cato, I was sort of thinking about, I was researching it, and it sounded like everybody was saying that they're doing SASE essentially. And yet, when I looked at the market, it hadn't quite taken off yet. And Gartner had some great stats on how it was going to grow or whatever. But move a few years on, and the answer is a resounding yes. We are seeing the customers are moving rapidly in some cases to single vendor SASE. But I think one really important point to that, and one aspect the customers maybe aren't focusing on, is that a single vendor doesn't necessarily mean a single technology or a single platform. And like expanding on that, what we would see is some of the larger vendors like your sort of Palo Alto and Fortinet, etc., are buying and acquiring smaller niche companies to create and stitch together a SASE portfolio or a SASE narrative effectively. And while this may be achieved in the long term, when all their technologies are eventually fully integrated, it does take a long time. So even if you have a single vendor in the short to medium term, the clients are still working with different technologies and different management platforms. And that doesn't really solve the client's issues in the short to medium term. The way I sort of view it is, in effect, it's like pulling a curtain over the complexity by putting a single vendor name on the technology stack. And that's a really important aspect that I think customers need to be aware of. Like, I suppose if you look at the specific advantages of having that single technology stack, there'll be the obvious consolidation to a single vendor, which improves supportability. And if something goes wrong, you've got a single vendor to work with rather than burning time trying to figure out, who do you contact, where do you raise a ticket, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've also got the consolidation from multiple different management interfaces down to a true single pane of glass. And it's the oft-used term that I hate, single pane of glass, because I've been hearing it for probably 14 years, and it's taken until now before I've actually seen what a true single pane of glass is. But all aspects of your WAN, remote access, firewall, IPS, CASB, DLP, SIEM, XDR, the vision of getting that presented through one console reduces your administrative overhead massively, not just in terms of knowing how to navigate a console, but also in terms of ongoing administration of the console. And you see some vendors still relying on server-based admin console. And I don't think that's fit for purpose in the architecture of today, where you're looking at this simplified sort of SASE approach. And I suppose one of the more important, but again, less obvious benefits of this single vendor approach is from a security perspective. It's when the same technology stack is handling both the networking and the security inspection. It makes it very difficult in that case for application flows to bypass security controls, either accidentally or deliberately. And if you think about those vendors who mostly or solely rely on agents to do their inspection and control, it might work fine for those machines in which the agent is installed and configured and registered and it's active and in line. But what about the other machines? How do you extend that same coverage to other nodes? How do you prevent shadow IT from bypassing the control? How do you opt in users who have decided to opt out? And you end up in a situation where the agent-based solution is relying on an implicit assumption that something else is preventing use outside the agent. And what we would see is that something else might well be a product with the same vendor badge on the outside, but oftentimes it isn't. And even if it is, you can bet your life it has a different platform and maybe even a different UI. So again, you're back to that additional complexity and additional risk if network and security aren't truly converged, you know.
Yeah.
And sorry, Shane, go on. Yeah.
No, I was thinking there, you know, you made some great points there about the approach that folks are taking with the single vendor.
Hmm.
You know, it's definitely growing, rapidly growing. Part of the marketplace is the SASE approach. I know we were talking there about, you know, some of the various technologies that are inherent to security, and one of the things people talk about, you know, lately, it's become quite a buzzword, is zero trust. And you know, I think you mentioned that as well, Niall, when you were introducing yourself. You know, from a Citrix point of view, zero trust is very much ingrained. You know, what are you hearing from customers today when you're talking about zero trust with them?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I suppose it's the word it's kind of banged around the most, really, isn't it? And it's like, where do you start with it and how do you define it? I suppose different people look at different aspects to it. Like I've heard it kind of, okay, always verify is probably the best way to think about it. And like, this role has been good for me. I've come into it recently enough, so I'm getting to have these conversations with customers from the outset. Because like, for me, it started off very much as a minefield. There's so many moving parts to it, so many aspects to it. And when you're looking and having these conversations with customers, it's the different concepts that are coming up now. When you start, say, something as high level as okay, let's even take in MFA, identity. Let's go from identity perspective. Like, MFA is the done thing now. It's never even a discussion. Everyone just has MFA, and if they don't, then okay, that's the first fallen block. So how are we always going to question essentially what's going on with this? And as we move through this, and I'm interested, I've heard great things about Cato, same with IGEL and Checkpoint. So this is as much for me as people on the call as well to learn about it. But once you go from identity, how are we looking at devices? How is, I suppose, everything being checked, whether it's managed device, unmanaged device? How are we making sure that what we're giving people is just enough for them to do their job? No more, no less. And I was funny, Shane, you asked me to join this, and I was listening to a good podcast from two guys, and they were talking about just enough access and just in time access. Now, just in time access, I'm not really sure how we're going to fit with that. Is, can you allow someone to access an application for a certain period of time, and you know they're just going to get their work done? But just enough access is probably a really, really nice concept that I'm going to see how we can potentially implement it more when you're looking at, okay, you can do your day-to-day work, whatever it may be, but if you need to elevate permissions, if you need to elevate your status on certain applications, whether it be a workflow that goes to your manager, whether you re-authenticate, whether you use your MFA again, stuff like that, these are the kind of conversations which are coming up. And again, you can take it from all the way from identity to device, application, go into infrastructure, go into the whole aspect of it. It's just like, I would hate to see someone fall at one hurdle. And it's suppose it's mapping all these aspects out, very much what you said, Anthony. I suppose Citrix, if anyone's ever worked with Citrix, you've heard single pane of glass mentioned, I'm sure. So it's very much trying to map out all these steps. And okay, even something as simple, do we have watermarking enabled? Okay, if it's sensitive information, something, and it's a deterrent, isn't it? Really, I suppose that's what we're looking for. Like, I personally don't think you can ever be 100% secure. Yeah, you can be 99%, but it's that old adage of a burglar looking at a house. If you have an alarm, they're probably not going to go there. If you have an alarm and a dog, they're definitely not going to go there. So it's the mitigating steps you can put in place across identity, device, application, infrastructure, network.
It's all about the mitigation. As you say, nothing is ever going to be 100%, where it's all about reducing the risk.
And like, you definitely can have, and we'll all agree there's great products out there. And again, I'm on here with 3 other great products. And yes, you absolutely can be very secure, but 100%, it's a bold statement to make that you're 100% secure.
You know, when it comes to Citrix, like, Citrix has always been traditionally known as the apps and desktop solution, but it's inherently a key layer in the security posture of a company, isn't it?
Yeah, like, I think, and that's the old adage, virtualization. Citrix virtualization, it just ticks that box. Yeah, what applications? Yeah, we'll get you them. Whereas, and I think now, especially for me coming into this role and getting more exposure to the market and not being kind of locked away working on product, there's definitely the layer of, okay, if we start something real high level with virtualization, like, okay, watermarking, simple kind of secure policies we can enable on virtualization. But for me now, Citrix has become so much more than this. There's such a secure posture we have and such a secure element in it. Like if we look at kind of a little bit more high level, the likes of app protection, so anti-screen capture, anti-key logging. Okay, we can enable this stuff. We can set it up as part of the deployment. If we want to go a little bit further, something I mentioned about devices, we can go another layer deeper and do contextual access, so smart access. We can do an EPA scan on endpoints. So you're looking at this and you're doing an EPA scan. They don't have the latest. I think we can even drill into like the latest OS. Okay, we don't want the OS they're working on, or the versions of browsers as well. So we're looking, what's the latest version of browsers? We don't really want these people on this. Okay, we can maybe lock down certain applications and don't give them to them. We can ask for MFA again. We can decide if a device is managed or unmanaged. And then we can go all the way into, okay, SPA, can we deliver applications in a different manner, enterprise browser. And I suppose something that's, very close to my heart is the Citrix security analytics. So a big thing, and not from a Citrix point of view, and I'm wearing a Citrix hat, but there's so much more to this that other companies are doing as well, is generating user risk scores. So always kind of contextually learning about what end users are doing, their normal behaviors. Like for me, for example, I'm in Paddington today, sunny Paddington, but I'm in the London office. So okay, it may generate a medium risk score, but we know from other people logging on here and smart learning that okay, this is not a high risk, it's not a breach. Where if I log on from the Arctic Circle, there's something probably wrong with that. So the ability to security analytics pick this up and perform actions on that. Okay, do we want to log this user off? Do we want to go MFA? Do we want to notify an admin? And then really drill into it, session recording. So again, something I haven't really been exposed to yet, and something I'm looking to get my teeth into a little bit more is, can we start recording this session? Like if I start download a large amount of files, and again, we're looking at the device here, could be potentially a breach device. Do we want to record this session and see what's going on? Like if I'm on Salesforce and just downloading files of customers, do we want to start session recording? Do we want to notify me, yes or no? So I think, and we talk about it, and we will talk about like all the different avenues we're trying to cover off here. And it's, have we got a mitigating step at each one of them? So that's my perspective, and that's how I'm kind of taking zero trust, is let's not fall at one hurdle. Okay, I heard it summed up quite well actually. It's like the old approach, and I suppose COVID changed all this, and I'd be interested to get other people to take on this. Is the old approach was you got up in the morning, got on the train, you went into the office, turned on your desktop, and you were locked in. Okay, let's think about it like that. You were locked into your office. There was your desktop. Like, you're not going to take a picture. There's going to be people in the office. You're not going to download things. You can probably lock down printers. But now we're everywhere. We're everywhere. Why would you not have a really, really hard external and a GUI middle? Like, so, and that's how I've been kind of thinking out of like our offices has just turned into the world as opposed to this big building. So it's really, really interesting. Listen, it's such an evolving space, and I heard a really interesting statistic. So call me out on this if you want. From time of a breach, it's apparently 160 days till it's actually realized on average. So call me out. That's a statistic I heard. So we'll take it from you guys as well. Call me a liar if you wish, if I'm right or wrong. But no, it's a really, really interesting space, and I kind of hope, never mind taking the Citrix element, but like, is it just enough access, just in time, MFA, identity, contextual access, smart access? If someone can take this and like, oh, we haven't got that, and run with that, I'm happy. I'm happy. At the end of the day, that's all we're looking to do, is, I suppose, as a community.
Yeah, no, there's some great points there, Niall, about all of the security capabilities that come with the Citrix stack today. And you touched on device posture and things like that. So the endpoint, everybody needs to have an endpoint. No matter what, somebody's connecting from a device somewhere. And like Simon, like if you look at endpoints today, they're coming in all shapes and sizes. From your conversation with your customers, how are they factoring their security posture into their endpoints?
Yeah, well, I think Niall hit the nail on the head from what I see in my customers, both historically, pre-COVID and during COVID, and now where we are in this world of hybrid work, right? Because the majority of people did used to go into the office, and if you were lucky, you might have got a laptop. The majority of people may well have had a desktop, and if you were accessing, dare I say, a Citrix environment or some form of desktop virtualization environment, you may well have had some form of thin client device. And everything was done inside the network. And so, you know, to Anthony's point, it was a lot easier to secure the network because everybody was inside work. And it was also a lot easier to secure and manage all of those endpoints. We had tools like SCCM that have been around for years, right? Making sure that we were updating applications. We had patching tools that were designed to work inside our network to look for vulnerabilities and patch the Windows endpoints, etc. And people deployed at least thin clients for a number of different reasons, but you know, it was either because they were slightly cheaper or they were easier to manage, but typically they just were super secure. Like a typical thin client didn't have any data on it. It was inherently secure. All it could do was connect into a virtualized desktop or a remote workload somewhere. In today's world, all of that has changed, right? As we've spoken about. The devices that people need to be more mobile. So instead of buying desktop PCs and thin clients now, everybody needs a laptop. Why does everyone need a laptop? Because we're all meant to be working in more of a hybrid fashion, which means, you know, 2 days a week I might be at home and 3 days a week I may well be in the office. And IT need to be able to provide me a consistent experience and also a secure one. So what am I actually seeing? I'm actually seeing people rethink not the device that they are sending down to their employees, but the operating system they put on that device that they send to their employees. So lots and lots of laptops going out, but on those laptops, rethinking whether Windows is actually the best operating system to put on that laptop, or whether there is something else out there that is, let's say, somewhat more easier to manage and inherently more secure and secure by design. And so that's what I work for iGel. I'm obviously spending a lot of my time talking about how iGel can be a key part of that. It can be an alternative operating system that can go on a laptop. It is inherently secure. It's incredibly lightweight. It's got a very small form factor. It's read-only, it's encrypted, etc., and no data exists on it. But it's no longer just about, can I connect into virtual workloads, to the conversations we've been having. It's about, I need to be able to connect to hybrid cloud environments. I need to be able to connect to my data center and the public cloud. I need to be able to access Windows-based applications, old DOS terminal emulation applications, and in fact connect into the world of SaaS and run things like Zoom and Teams and all the rest of it. And so there's a fine balance between securing an environment and also still allowing productivity. So what do I really see? I see a large number of organizations looking now at how can they deliver an endpoint that allows someone to be productive. It needs to be performant, it needs to work, it needs to be simple to use, but it also needs to be incredibly easy to secure and easy to manage. And those two things don't really typically go together, and you don't necessarily assume or associate, should I say, endpoint management, or at least Windows endpoint management, with those things historically, because typically we've had all of these tools and all of this complexity that we need to add into that Windows estate to make sure that we can manage it and that we can secure it. So that's really what I'm seeing at the moment.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned there, which I think a lot of people's ears would pick up at, is when you said about data. There's been lots of stories of late in the news. We saw the PSNI in Northern Ireland, where devices had been lost or stolen, and they've had massive data breaches. How are customers factoring that into their decision around endpoints?
It's becoming more and more relevant. There are a huge amount of tools out there, as we know, that can monitor data flow. How much data is being synchronized down from OneDrive, for instance. Niall mentioned, being able to monitor suspicious activity when too much data is being synced to a foreign location, for instance. But actually, the real question is how much data does actually need to move down onto that endpoint? Citrix has got an incredible amount of innovation in the security space at the moment, but they've still got desktop virtualization at their core. And I am a very, very strong believer that where possible, Windows-based applications and applications that need to access the corporate data center should be delivered by some form of desktop virtualization, VDI, whatever you want to call it. And the simple reason for that is that no data is ever leaving the data center. If you look at our mobile phones, I take a wild guess that every single person on this call, on this webinar, has either got an iPhone or an Android device. And we probably use it for work in one way or another, some of us more than others. And in almost every single case I can think of, there is almost no data on those devices. You know, you may sync some email, fair enough, but there's a way to remote wipe it. But think about how your mobile phone works. Your mobile phone is really a set of micro applications that need connectivity to the cloud, and the cloud is where that processing is happening. That's where the data is, it's where the processing power is, it's where the majority of the intelligence is. It's how all of these little applications that we download so fast, because they're just isolated small little micro apps. That needs to happen in the desktop world. It needs to happen in the corporate world, right? There is no reason today why somebody cannot be connected to the cloud for the majority of their working day. First question any one of us will ask when we walk into a hotel, a train station, an airport, whatever it might be, is what's the Wi-Fi code? How do I get on the Wi-Fi? As soon as you're connected to the Wi-Fi, you've got the ability to access data through a web browser, join a Teams call, or access back-end corporate data using things like desktop virtualization. And so, you know, by having a lightweight, thin, read-only operating system that gives you access to all of that without actually processing the majority of it locally means that you don't have to bring data down to the device. And that's what a lot of organizations are now looking at is, can we change our way of thinking? Can we change the operating system that we deploy down to our employees, and perhaps move towards that more mobile-like experience where, you know, you can have a thin layer at the edge, and then most of that data and that processing is done somewhere else. It also makes securing that endpoint a lot easier, and you actually have to worry a lot less about what you're doing, what you're monitoring and securing from a connectivity point of view as well.
Yeah, and like I say, it's all about mitigating the risk. As Niall had said, nothing's ever going to be 100% secure, but you have to do everything you can to reduce the risk. And
exactly.
You know, we said there, yes, fair enough, that there may be no data on an endpoint. And if we look at the different layers of security that we're talking about here, we have the network layer, the application delivery layer, and the endpoint layer. John, I think you'd agree with me that despite all these multiple layers of security, it's often the user's inbox that's going to be the last line of defense. You know,
So true.
what approaches have you seen your customers take to maximize their protection there?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right, and I think despite all of the industry that goes around the security world, it's still 91% of attacks start with an email.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 91% of cyber breaches start with an email. Yeah. And I expected that figure to change over the years. It was 91% on my first day at Mimecast 8 years ago, and it's still 91% today.
Wow.
And I think it's because it's quite fruitful, because you are preying on getting around what is basic security in some instances. You've got some people that are using legacy technology, you've got some people that are using the best of the best. But you don't have to be a genius to do these types of attacks. So it makes it quite challenging for IT teams. And we have this conversation all day, every day. You've got the security team and the infrastructure team, depending on the size of your organization. If you're lucky enough to have that under one roof, then brilliant. But there's always these two teams fighting against each other. It's security team want to lock everything down, infrastructure team want to make sure that end user productivity isn't impacted in any way, and we want to maybe let a few more things through. So I think the way that I've seen this done best, and it pains me to say this because Checkpoint can't help with all of this, but in the interest of knowledge sharing, you split it out into having something that looks at the human layer and something that is a software layer. Because I think end users are a company's biggest strength and a company's biggest weakness, is the politest way I can put it.
Yeah.
And I think if you can have awareness training, whether you do that through another company or whether you do that kind of thing in-house yourself, it certainly worked over the years. And I think if you look at the success of companies like Know Before, Fish.me, Wombat, Atata, before some of them were acquired off by bigger companies, there was a bit of a boom maybe 5-6 years ago when I think the main attacks that we were looking to stop were phishing, impersonation, whaling, or everything in that kind of bracket, where actually if you sat an end user down and said, can you tell me if that is a bad email, some of them that actually look at it close enough, it's not to say they do it every time, but if you actually get them to sit down and look, then actually they can probably pick out, like maybe it's a fake Amazon email, the Amazon logo is blurry, or if you go to reply to that email, it's a different address, so the reply to and the sending email address don't match. But I think where the human layer struggles slightly is with the slightly newer waves of attacks that are out there. So phishing and ransomware phishing and malware still make up the bulk of attacks that are out there. But business email compromise, I think, is something that everyone who has an interest in email security has been talking about at length for the last 3+ years, maybe a bit more than that. If you were talking about it before that, you were a bit ahead of the curve. And I think that's where you need the software layer in place, because if you're relying on a secure email gateway, or if you're relying on Office 365 or Google's native security tools, actually the internal attacks, or the business email compromise attacks, or something that originates from a legitimate but compromised mailbox, is the most difficult thing to check. Because if you're an end user and I'm emailing one of my colleagues, the email is coming from my correct email address. It's still got my email signature stamped at the bottom. There's nothing to look out for in the reply to box. So actually, a lot of the training that we've been doing with users over the years is nullified when things start coming from a legitimate internal box. So I think that's where you need a software layer. Ultimately, everyone, I think, with unlimited budgets and blank checkbooks would have software layer or software layers in place, but it's that kind of balance. Not everyone has all the budget in the world to spend on a software layer, so maybe they push them all towards the human approach. But I think as attacks develop, we're not talking about kids sat in parents' basements sending off these emails and we're just trying to catch a few people out here and there. Like, there's a huge industry that actually sits behind some of these attacks. So if you go into the dark web, there's phishing as a service, there's ransomware as a service, like no win, no fee approaches, and ultimately you can buy kits that are, well, phishing kits or malware kits that are purposely designed to bypass. Could be Mimecast, could be Proofpoint, could be Barracuda, could be Office 365, could be whatever you want, and obviously with different variations of success. But you need a software layer now that's going to keep up with the new attacks, because it's only a matter of time until the kids in the basement are completely nullified because everyone's using AI to attack. And if you're not using a technology that uses AI, then ultimately you're always going to get left behind. So I think I was going to say that the way that I've seen people do this best is get your human layer to a state where you're quite happy that they're going to pick up the basics, but a software layer that has AI, threat intelligence, sandboxing if possible, and you have a real belt and braces approach, it means that you rely on your human layer much less.
Yeah, and you talk about the software solutions there, the API-driven solutions, the machine ones that have AI and machine learning. So like that is a rapidly growing sector there. I think I read like some Gartner statistics that expect it to grow in the next 20% market share in the next 3 years. What are you seeing with customers you're talking to? Are they getting more and more interested in these API-driven solutions?
Yeah, I think during my time at Mimecast, I saw people that were using on-prem Exchange and people that were using Office 365, and generally the approach would have been, if you've got budget, you're going to buy a secure email gateway, whichever one takes your fancy. Proofpoint, Mimecast, Barracuda, Message Labs, whatever it might be. They all perform similarly. Some have just got some features that are relevant to other companies or not. Then 365, I'm not going to say they caught up, but their security offering became much more compelling. So we saw some people stick with the secure email gateways, and we saw some people go from secure email gateway to Office 365. And now what we're seeing wholesale, so the majority of people out there, is people are realizing that Office 365 is good, not great. Secure email gateways are getting left behind when it comes to looking at these newer versions of attacks, because they sit outside of your 365 infrastructure rather than being an API approach that connects directly in. Business email compromise, I'm going to keep saying it, but business email compromise attacks, you need something that's connecting in at that layer, so you've got full visibility. So now we're seeing that wholesale people are looking at API-based solutions, whether it be Checkpoint or whether it be the others out there. But I think the main benefits, and one of the reasons why I joined Checkpoint, was there are kind of two main benefits. One of them I've already kind of touched on, is connects directly into Office 365 or Google Mail. So if you're looking for business email compromise attacks or looking to protect against them, then you need something that gives you that visibility. Then the second piece is, I think all pure play API-based solutions, I say pure play because there are some secure email gateways that have pushed an API-based solution out the door quite quickly. I'm talking about the pure play ones. They've kind of ran out the door and created these AI machine learning models that are designed to pick up phishing attacks and business email compromise. So the technology is designed not to rely solely on a few indicators in the headers. So the examples I gave previously, like if we're looking for reply to mismatches and things like that, this is technology that's going to notice how I usually sign off my email, and if there's a difference in that. It's going to notice that I don't normally ask my colleagues to go to the BP garage and buy Amazon vouchers and send me the codes. It's going to notice what my usual behaviors are and detect that there's going to be slight variations to that. And what I think the majority of solutions have done, and I'll use the blanket approach here, some of them have got great AI and machine learning models, some of them have got okay, but are getting better. But what they have got brilliant at is not just relying on a few indicators. And Checkpoint is in that mix as well, where you actually need a lot of information about an attack in order to be confident that it's something that doesn't need to pass through. Because, again, talking about the infrastructure versus security argument, the last thing you want is the infrastructure team saying, why have we got so many emails being stopped? My end users are kicking off about this. But I think when we talk about when we're speaking to customers about this, I think there's a couple of questions that are always brought up, and the first is outside of the AI and machine learning models, what does your solution do to protect the inbox? I know this isn't a sales pitch, so I'm not going to give you the full answer, but I think the important thing to recognize is that not all API-based solutions out there have anything past AI and machine learning models. And although that's great, what that's going to leave you exposed to is malware, because AI will get you so far. But if you haven't got anything like a sandbox or anything that's purposely designed to look at malware, it's going to let those kind of things through. So I think the main things that we're looking out for are solutions that will do the basics. So we're still going to look at signature-based detection, something that has a sandbox preferably, so that if URLs or attachments need additional inspection, there's a facility to do that. Threat intelligence, I think, is more important than ever. Threat intelligence at a global scale, I think, is really important. I think some of the larger secure email gateway vendors have got great threat intelligence, and some of the API solutions are kind of getting there, but it's a newer market, so it's a bit tough to come by. And ultimately, it all needs to tie together. We don't. I think it may have been Anthony or Niall, I can't remember, sorry. But I think the point you make is every customer we speak to is automation, consolidation, how do we do more with less? And I think going back 5 or 10 years ago, I think everyone was told to go out and let's just buy best of breed if we can afford it. We'll worry about if it talks to each other later on. Whereas now I think actually the market's changing and people are thinking, I can't give the name, but we're talking to a global company at the moment that has 62 security vendors across the whole portfolio, and they're trying to consolidate that down into 4 key, core vendors, they're calling them. And that's just following what the rest of the market's doing. So it's great if you can get a point solution that's going to deal with business email compromise, but actually if it can filter in and become part of a much wider picture, then I think that's generally what customers are looking for. And again, I'm sorry if I've got the name wrong. It may have been Niall, I think, who was mentioning this. I think actually what's great about these API-based solutions is that they're quick to test. We speak to a lot of customers and they say actually the cost of evaluating solutions can actually be probably the same amount of cost in terms of time and all the expensive people that are on these calls for the first year of paying for that solution. And coming from the secure or gateway world, where you'd probably need 30 days to implement, you're going to have to turn all your other security off. We're going to have to implement, that's going to take about 30 days. Then you want to do a 30-day evaluation. And then if you want to do it with another secure or gateway vendor, you're going to have to do all of that process again. So you're looking at 60 days per vendor. Whereas the API-based solutions are plug and play. Our solution takes 3 minutes to install. I dare say all other API-based solutions out there will do something similar, and you can run them in tandem. So where we used to have these big, long processes about how are we actually going to pick what's the right solution, you can make the decisions much, much quicker. And one last piece, so I know I'm probably going over my time here. I think roadmap. A lot of customers like the technology and they like how it looks at the moment, but you've probably seen or heard Message Labs get bought by Symantec, and you've seen Ironport get bought by Cisco, and these are fantastic technologies at the time that were just not invested in enough to keep them at that really high level for an extended period of time. So when looking at other solutions that are out there, I think getting an idea of the roadmap, not just from an email security perspective, but from a company perspective. So you can see if you're going to make an investment to, first of all, investigate if it's the right solution for you, but then also invest in them time and time again as you go through your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5+ years as a happy customer. You need to make sure that they're matching your efforts. So that's all I'd say.
No, that's really good information there, John. And as you said, it is a rapidly growing market share. It's definitely getting more and more interest out there in the marketplace. So hopefully, folks listening, you got some good information out of that. As we discussed here, the concept of the webinar was from here to there. So discussing how we went all the way from the network to the application delivery to the endpoint, all the way to the user's inbox, and how our panelists here were able to provide their insights on each of those the different aspects and the technologies that can be used for that. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, so I think we've got time for them, so we'll go with them. Simon, one for you. Are you seeing a bigger uptake of the iGel OS on mobile devices rather than the traditional thin client?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Organizations that have still got office-based workers, they still buy a thin client. They still can put iGel on it. iGel can go on a number of different hardware thin clients, no problem at all. But the future is iGel as an operating system alongside Windows and Chrome OS on laptop devices. For those people that need to provide mobile, secure access to the cloud, then that's what we're seeing. So yeah, the answer very simply is yes, 100%.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What else have we got here? We won't get to all these, but Anthony, here's an interesting one for Cato. We're a medium-sized company with just under 200 employees, 3 locations, and remote access requirements. Would Cato be a fit for us?
Well, similar to my learned friend there, the answer is simply yes, but it's because of what the architecture provides, which is, if you look at SASE, it's the four pillars are convergence of network and security. It has to be cloud native, has to be global, and it has to service all edges from any location, essentially anywhere in the world. And what's driven this is probably the customer demand for, I guess, simplicity and scalability and flexibility and pervasive security. And that's forced this sort of convergence of the WAN edge and the network security markets. And with something like Cato, the way it's architected, it doesn't matter whether it's 10 remote users and that's it, or whether it's, our largest customers have, 20,000 sites, 100,000 remote users. It's the same principle and the same architecture. It's deployed almost like on a consumption model. So you know, it's fit for all. It's the exact same, and no matter what your requirements, it'll be the same experience, the same controls, the same interfaces. So short answer again, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Question on Citrix app protection, Niall. So, are there any specific license requirements to use Citrix app protection, anti-screenshot, and the anti-key logging features?
So as part of licensing, so it's part of DAS Premium, sorry, Universal Premium now, as it's called. Citrix loves to change their names. It's a conversation for a different day. It's part of that SKU. You can also purchase it standalone as well. So if you are running something different, you can purchase it standalone. The kind of classic with Citrix, we need to just make sure if you're using Storefront, the version of Storefront you're on is, I think it's 19.12. You need to just check delivery controllers and of course workspace app version. But again, the long way to say yes. You can get it within DAS Premium or Universal Premium, and you can buy it as a separate SKU as well.
Awesome, thanks, Niall. And one here, and I think, Jonathan, you may have actually answered this since the question came in when you talked about trialing the API solution. How difficult is it to cut over from a traditional appliance-based solution to an API-driven one? And I think you had mentioned that it's actually quite easy. You can run them in tandem.
Yeah. So if you're moving away from a secure mail gateway to an API-based solution, first point I'd say is you don't have to move away from those solutions. You can use them either as a replacement or as a supplement to a secure mail gateway. But if you're hell bent on moving away from your secure mail gateway, then we can run in tandem for the time being. As I say, our POC and trial format is exactly the same as our live installation or live customer installation. So it takes 3 minutes. We do our learning phase in the background, and all you'd need to do in order to complete the switch and make sure that we're scanning emails properly is move your MX records away from secure mail gateway solution back across to Office 365 or Google. So it's something that we've seen people do in less than an hour, rather than it being a 30-day exercise.
Fantastic. That's really cool. So we're coming up on time here. For everyone who joined the webinar today, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you got some good knowledge and takeaways on some of the different aspects of how you can improve the security posture of your own environment, be it network, endpoint, application delivery, or even the good old email that John said is responsible for many cyber attacks. My thanks to Simon, Niall, John, and Anthony for joining us today. Just as a reminder, for those of you who will be attending the series, if you attend all 3 of the webinars in our series, you will be in draw to win a holiday, which is a €1,000 voucher from Trailfinders. And the next webinar in our series it's still about the apps, which is penciled in for the 24th of October at 2 p.m. So you can scan the QR code there to register, or follow us on social media to get more details of it. Once again, my thank you to my 4 panelists. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Lots of good conversation. And thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Shane.
Thanks,
everyone.
Have a good
Shane.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.